0312 hours. International waters, the Eastern Pacific. A U.S. Coast Guard hit-run sniper is lying prone in the open door of an MH-60 Jayhawk helicopter, 100 feet above the surface of the ocean, staring down the barrel of a .50 caliber rifle at an object moving at 45 knots through the dark water below. The target is a narco submarine, technically a semi-submersible, a low-profile composite-hulled vessel designed to ride with only a few inches of freeboard above the waterline, eliminating the visual and radar profile that would otherwise make it detectable. 4 Yamaha F350 outboard engines are driving it hard through the Pacific Chop. Below the deck, the cargo, 20,000 pounds of cocaine. By any current market estimate, the single largest high-speed narco shipment the U.S. Coast Guard has intercepted since 2007. Nearly $500 million in a hull the size of a large pickup truck. The sniper's job is to put .50 caliber rounds through the engine block of one of those outboards. Not the hull, not the crew. The engine block specifically, a target the size of a hardcover book, moving in 3 dimensions simultaneously, attached to a vessel that is actively trying to maneuver away from the shot. If the round goes slightly left and hits the fuel system instead of the engine, the 4 high-performance motors running on adulterated fuel become an ignition event. Evidence destroyed, possibly crew destroyed. Prosecution impossible. If the shot misses entirely, the vessel's crew has approximately 30 seconds to open the self-sinking valve built into the hull before the USCG Monroe closes the distance. $500 million disappears into 3,000 feet of water. The load, the vessel, and months of intelligence work go with it. The sniper takes the shot. What most people watching this engagement see is the bullet. What they are not seeing is the chain of decisions, intelligence operations, and deliberate deceptions that began 6 months earlier and that placed this specific vessel at this specific location at this specific moment, delivering it to a trap it had been guided into without knowing it existed. That chain is the actual story. The fundamental question that preceded this entire operation was not operational. It was economic. The cartel organization running this shipment had been bleeding cash for months under Operation Pacific Viper, the joint U.S.-led interdiction campaign that had seized approximately 50 tons of narcotics in the preceding quarter and frozen significant money laundering infrastructure. A criminal enterprise under sustained cash flow pressure behaves like any other business under financial distress. It takes risks it would not otherwise accept. The specific risk it accepted was consolidation. In narco-trafficking doctrine, load distribution is the cardinal rule. Spread cargo across many small shipments to ensure that any single interdiction represents a manageable loss. The organization abandoned that rule and concentrated its recovery bet on a single vessel carrying a single massive load, expecting to recoup its losses in one successful transit. U.S. intelligence knew this was coming before the cartel had finished building the boat. The industrial fingerprint approach is less sophisticated sounding than satellite surveillance or signals intelligence, but it is operationally powerful precisely because it is so difficult to counter. Over a period of 6 months, analysts tracking shell companies registered as fishing cooperatives in remote coastal areas flagged a purchasing pattern. Large quantities of high-performance Yamaha F350 engine components, specialized stainless steel propellers tuned for speed rather than efficiency, composite hull construction materials in quantities and specifications inconsistent with any commercial fishing application, and hydraulic suspension systems designed specifically for high-speed offshore racing vessels. None of those purchases were illegal individually. Together, they described a vessel under construction, a purpose-built narco semi-submersible with performance characteristics that could be computed from the component specifications with reasonable accuracy. Maximum speed, approximately 40 to 45 knots under optimal conditions. Range, constrained by the fuel load the hull could carry at that speed. Optimal operating sea state, waves below 4 feet for maximum performance and cargo security. The vessel's capabilities were known before it was completed. The completion date could be estimated from the pace of component orders, and the operating window could be computed from the weather. This is where the analysis shifted from intelligence to prediction. A vessel of this profile, carrying 9 tons of cargo, with the fuel range its hull can accommodate, operating in the Eastern Pacific during the period corresponding to its estimated completion date, has a finite set of viable transit routes. The Blue Water Corridor, the deeper Pacific route away from coastal traffic, provides the best protection from surface patrol, but exposes the vessel to surveillance aircraft coverage and creates refueling logistics problems. The Coastal Corridor runs closer to shore, offers refueling options, and presents a more complex radar environment for large surface assets, but it is narrower and more consistently monitored. The cartel's planners would weigh those options and make a rational decision. The U.S. task force's goal was to ensure that the rational decision led directly into the waiting position. This is where information operations replaced surveillance work. Through established intelligence channels, double agents embedded in cartel logistics networks, and compromised communication accounts that the cartel did not know were monitored, a specific piece of disinformation was introduced that the U.S. Coast Guard and allied naval forces were concentrating their entire surface asset deployment along the Blue Water Corridor for a joint exercise, leaving the coastal route effectively uncovered for a 72-hour window. The false information was detailed, internally consistent, and delivered through sources the cartel had reason to trust. It described vessel numbers, patrol patterns, and communication frequencies, all fabricated, all designed to make the coastal corridor appear to be the obvious choice for a vessel trying to avoid detection. The cartel's operational planners received the information, assessed it, and ordered the Super Go Fast to transit the coastal corridor. The USCGC Monroe was already positioned and running MCON, Complete Electronic Emissions Silence. No active radar, no radio transmissions, maintaining the acoustic and electromagnetic profile of a vessel that is simply not there. A large surface ship that is not actively transmitting does not appear as an anomalous contact on a small vessel's equipment. The Monroe was invisible because she chose to be. 30,000 feet above the intercept zone, a Coast Guard surveillance aircraft had been in silent patrol mode since before the target vessel entered the operational area. The platform carries a synthetic aperture radar system, a technology that deserves explanation because it is what made finding a semi-submersible in open ocean possible at all. A conventional pulse radar detects objects by emitting energy and measuring the reflected return. At the frequencies used for surface search, wave clutter, the radar returns from ocean surface motion, creates enough noise in the picture that a small, low-profile vessel running at high speed is effectively invisible. It looks like wave clutter because its return characteristics are similar to the returns the radar is already filtering out. The semi-submersible was designed around this limitation. Synthetic aperture radar doesn't just measure reflected energy. It synthesizes a high-resolution image from the interference patterns between multiple sequential radar pulses, using the platform's own motion to simulate a much larger antenna aperture than the physical equipment could produce. The resolution is fine enough to detect not just vessel hulls, but the turbulence signature in the wake behind 4 high-output outboard engines running at maximum power. The cartel's Go Fast boat is invisible to conventional surface search radar. It is not invisible to a wake signature processed through synthetic aperture algorithms from 30,000 feet. The surveillance aircraft localized the target, computed its course and speed, and transmitted the targeting package to the Monroe via encrypted satellite communication link, a data transfer that produced no detectable radio frequency emission in the bands the Go Fast's crew was monitoring. The Monroe launched the MH-60 Jayhawk, carrying the Hydron interdiction team the moment the target package was confirmed. The helicopter's appearance produced the cartel crew's first response: maximum acceleration and a course change towards shallower water where the vessel's maneuverability could potentially complicate pursuit. 45 knots. The MH-60 Jayhawk cruises at 155 knots. The distance gap between the helicopter and the Go Fast was not a tactical problem. The crew's second response produced the intelligence failure that ended their operation. Somebody on that vessel activated a GPS jamming device, a portable civilian-grade unit intended to create spoofing interference across satellite positioning and communication frequencies. The theory was that electronic interference would degrade the helicopter's navigation and force it to break off pursuit. The jamming device did not affect the MH-60's navigation. Military aircraft operating in drug interdiction roles use encrypted military standard GPS signals on frequencies and with authentication protocols that civilian jamming equipment cannot meaningfully disrupt. The helicopter continued its intercept. What the jamming device did do was broadcast. Every electronic jamming system, by definition, emits energy. The emission spectrum of the device the crew activated was immediately detected and characterized by the helicopter's semi-active electronic warfare suite. Instead of creating confusion, the device had converted the Go Fast's position into a pulsing electromagnetic beacon. broadcasting its exact location on a frequency the Heatron team could home on with precision. The crew had turned their evasion equipment into a locator transponder. The Monroe's weapons release authorization came through. The helicopter established its firing geometry, accounting for the vessel's speed, heading, the helicopter's own motion, wind, and the specific target point on the outboard engine housing. The Heatron sniper computed his hold. The .50 caliber round left the barrel at a velocity that covers the distance between rifle and target, faster than the vessel's motion can meaningfully shift the aim point. The round hit the gear case of the starboard outboard engine. Black smoke and oil. The engine seized. 3 engines now driving a hull designed for 4. The vessel's speed dropped sharply and its handling became erratic. The crew lost their footing. The Monroe's response boat medium was in the water before the engine stopped burning, closing the remaining distance in 90 seconds. The crew did not reach the self-sinking valve. 20,000 pounds of cocaine recovered, intact. The GPS jamming device recovered, intact. Physical evidence of an attempted interference with federal law enforcement equipment. The vessel itself preserved as evidence. The crew in custody. The operation ran from initial intelligence collection to final arrest across 6 months of sustained analytical work, culminating in a 30-second shot at 45 knots in the dark. The cost accounting is not primarily financial. The cartel spent millions of dollars over months designing and building a vessel specifically optimized to evade U.S. maritime law enforcement. They developed MCON procedures to suppress their electronic profile during transit. They had established intelligence sources they believed were reliable. They chose their route based on what they believed was accurate information about U.S. deployment patterns. Every one of those countermeasures was identified, characterized, and either bypassed or turned against them. The industrial purchasing pattern identified the vessel before it was completed. The synthetic aperture radar found it despite its low observable design. The disinformation operation steered it into the prepared intercept zone. The encrypted communications link maintained the Monroe's silence. The military GPS made the jamming device irrelevant, and the jamming device itself became a targeting beacon. The cartel built a sophisticated evasion system. The U.S. task force built a more complete information picture. The evasion system ran directly into the picture it couldn't see. That asymmetry between the information the cartel thought it had and the information the U.S. task force actually had was the engagement. Everything else was execution. The next organization that attempts a similar operation will face the same problem. The industrial fingerprint of building a high-performance narco vessel at scale leaves procurement trails that composite analysis can read. The weather window constraint that a high-speed oceanic transit requires is computable from published meteorological data. The route choice can be influenced by disinformation delivered through channels the target believes are secure. And whatever electronic countermeasures a vessel deploys are most likely to degrade the target's own position security before they degrade the capabilities of a platform running military standard encrypted systems. The .50 caliber round is the visible end of a chain that starts with an engine parts order on a fake fishing cooperative's purchase ledger. By the time the sniper takes his breath, the outcome was already determined, 6 months earlier, in an analyst's spreadsheet. If this breakdown gave you a clear picture of how cross-domain intelligence operations actually produce tactical results, subscribe and share it. More of these analyses keep coming as long as you are here for them.